In few days, a tax you've been paying on almost everything you buy is legally required to disappear. No vote, no new law needed, just a countdown clock that started back in February. And yet, almost nobody in Washington is planning for that to actually happen. If you've bought a car, a couch, a phone, or groceries in the last 5 months, you've been paying this tax without a single receipt, calling it that. On July 24th, it either vanishes or something worse replaces it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which one is more likely, and the 3 moves that protect your money either way. Let's rewind for 10 seconds. Back in April of last year, Trump slapped tariffs on almost every country on earth. Using emergency powers, he claimed let him act alone. Then, in February this year, the Supreme Court said no, 6-3. Those emergency tariffs were illegal. Here's the part that got buried under the headline. Within hours, the administration reached for a different law and reimposed a 10% tariff on nearly all imports anyway. Same tax, different legal doorway. That doorway is called Section 122. And Section 122 comes with something the old law didn't have, an expiration date, a hard statutory 150-day clock. That clock runs out July 24th. So the real question isn't will tariffs go away? It's what does the administration do in the 19 days before the lights go out on this one? Here's the mechanism, and it matters because it tells you what happens next. Section 122 was never designed to be a permanent tariff tool. It's an old, rarely used 1974 law meant for short-term balance of payments emergencies. Think of it as a 150-day pressure valve, not a foundation you build a house on. Congress wrote it that way on purpose. Use it fast, use it briefly, then it turns off automatically unless lawmakers vote to keep it running. Think of it like a hotel key card programmed for a 5-month stay. The administration checked in on February 24th. July 24th, the card stops working, unless someone at the front desk reprograms it. And that's exactly what's been happening behind the scenes. While this 10% global tariff has been running out the clock, the administration has been quietly building the replacement furniture. 2 major Section 301 investigations are underway. One into manufacturing overcapacity covering 16 countries and more than 75% of all US imports. Another into forced labor practices covering 60 economies, touching nearly every import that reaches American shelves. Those investigations don't expire. They can produce permanent tariffs, not temporary ones. On top of that, Section 232 tariffs, the ones on steel, aluminum, copper, semiconductors, cars, and lumber, running as high as 50%, were never tied to this clock at all. Those stay exactly where they are, no matter what happens July 24th. So here's the pattern, the part the headlines skip. This isn't a story about tariffs ending. It's a story about the administration swapping a temporary tool for permanent ones before the temporary one runs out. The 150-day clock was never the whole plan, it was the bridge. Now let's kill the panic headlines because there are 2 competing ones and they can't both be true. Headline 1: Tariffs are about to disappear, prices are about to crash. Overstated. The 10% global rate might lapse, but the bigger tariffs on steel, autos, copper, and semiconductors were built on completely different legal authority. Those don't touch this deadline at all. Headline 2: This is about to get catastrophically worse. Also overstated, at least for now. Trump has had the legal room to raise this tariff to 15% since February and hasn't pulled that trigger, partly because the administration has already locked in specific rates with trading partners, 10% for the UK, 15% for the EU, through separate deals that don't hinge on July 24th either. What's actually true is messier than either headline. There's real legal uncertainty layered on top of the political uncertainty. A trade court already ruled this specific 10% tariff unlawful back in May. An appeals court paused that ruling in June, which is the only reason customs is still collecting the tax today while the case works through the system. So what actually changed isn't a number, it's the level of certainty. Before, importers knew the rate. Now, for the next few weeks, they don't know which authority. Congress, the courts, or executive action decides what happens next. And uncertainty, not the tariff rate itself, is what businesses hate most, because uncertainty is what gets passed to you in the price tag. Let's make this concrete. 3 ways this actually shows up in your life. First, the direct cost. This 10% tariff alone has added up to roughly $1,500 per household this year in higher prices, spread across everything from electronics to clothing to furniture. That's not a one-time hit. That's baked into prices you're already paying every time you check out. Second, the everyday cost you don't see on the receipt. Even if this specific 10% expires, the Section 232 tariffs on steel, aluminum, and copper stay at 25 to 50%. That means appliances, cars, and anything built with metal keep their inflated price tag no matter what happens on the 24th. If you're shopping for a car or a washing machine this summer, don't wait for this deadline to save you money. It won't. Third, the income and hiring impact. Manufacturers who rely on imported parts have spent 5 months unable to plan more than 150 days ahead. Businesses that can't predict their input costs don't expand, don't hire, and delay raises. If you work in retail, logistics, manufacturing, or auto sectors directly exposed to import costs, this is the kind of uncertainty that shows up as a hiring freeze before it shows up in a headline. Here's what to actually do with this. 5 moves ranked by urgency. 1. Stop timing big purchases around July 24th. If you need a car, appliance, or electronics in the next month, the Section 232 tariffs on steel, aluminum, and semiconductors aren't going anywhere. Buy based on your budget, not a headline you saw about tariffs ending. 2. Build a 3-month buffer if your paycheck touches manufacturing, retail, or logistics. These are the sectors most exposed to a 19-day window of legal chaos. 3 months of essential expenses in a high-yield savings account gives you room if hiring slows in your industry this fall. 3. Check if you're owed a refund. If you imported goods or run a small business that did between April 2025 and February 2026 under the old, now illegal tariffs, there's an active claims process through Customs and Border Protection's KP portal. That's real money sitting on the table for anyone who paid those original tariffs. 4. Diversify where your investments have exposure to import-heavy sectors. Companies dependent on Chinese manufacturing or global steel inputs are the ones most exposed to whatever replaces this 10% tariff. This isn't a call to panic sell, it's a call to know your exposure before the news cycle forces you to react to it. 5. And this is the one to actually bookmark. Watch what Congress does, not what Trump says. Only Congress can permanently extend Section 122 tariff authority. Everything else, the Section 301 investigations, the 232 tariffs, moves on a separate track regardless of July 24th. If you want the real signal of where this goes long term, that's where to look. Here's the honest version of this story. July 24th isn't the day tariffs end. It's the day one temporary tool expires while several permanent ones are already being built to replace it. The headline moment isn't the real moment. The real moment is the 8 months of investigations happening quietly underneath it. And that's where your prices, your job market, and your portfolio are actually being decided. If you want to understand how we got here, I broke that down in full videos ago. And if you want to stay ahead of what happens after July 24th, instead of finding out from a price tag, hit subscribe. This is exactly the kind of story Dollar&Demand exists to translate before it hits your wallet.